Welcome back. I hope everyone is having a cool summer and not dealing with too much heat because it is pretty hot out there. It is it's almost unbearable at times. However, if you are inside, maybe listening to a podcast like this one, you maybe have a little bit of time for some cool history. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about presidential history in the United States. We're going to talk about some fun things that have happened to presidents, some interesting things. It wasn't fun for everyone involved. You'll see what I'm talking about as we go forward. But I think these are I'm going to go over three of the more interesting things that have happened to presidents of the United States in our history here in this country. There's so many things. When you look at the history of the United States, there are so many, so many things to choose from. But these are the three that I picked today to talk about, and I hope you enjoy them as much as I do, because I love talking about this stuff. So let's get started. Let's get right into it. Some fun presidential history, right? Well, one of the first things we're going to talk about is a president named John Tyler. Now, you may have heard of John Tyler. You know, Tippecanoe and Tyler too, right? You've probably heard that at some point. A history teacher in your lifetime has mentioned Tippecanoe and Tyler too. That was the big campaign slogan for the winning side, right? William Henry Harrison, the first Whig president of the United States, the Whig Party, right? If you remember the Whig Party. So the Whig Party, William Henry Harrison comes in. He also is famous for being the shortest serving president of the United States, like 30 days, 31 days, I think. And he died, and the reason for that, interestingly enough, is he gave the longest inaugural speech in presidential history on the coldest day recorded. I mean, there could be some, arguments on whether it was the coldest day of an inaugural speech, but it was pretty close. And he got pneumonia and died in 30 days. His wife hadn't even got to Washington. She hadn't even picked out the curtains yet. So, I mean, it was really quick for the first Whig president. Now, unfortunately for the Whigs, they had chosen John Tyler, who was a former Democrat, and they thought, well, for some of those states' rights Democrats, he'll be able to help them out and this and that and the other, and maybe go with us, Whiggish ideas. But as it turns out, he didn't really do that. He kind of went into business for himself, which a lot of times these guys will do, and it didn't work out great for the Whigs, So he didn't really become a Whig president, really. Anyway, but that's not what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about an incident that revolves around the USS Princeton. Now, if you've never heard of the USS Princeton, well, you may have if you study World War II. There was another USS Princeton that was in the Battle of Leyte Gulf that was sunk during the Battle of Leyte Gulf. But that's not this one. This one is, it also had a bad incident happen to it. It was on the Potomac River. Now, so basically, story goes, John Tyler is really proud of this boat, right? And he wants to show it off. He has dignitaries from all over. They are coming to, take a little pleasure cruise down the Potomac, have a good old time, enjoy the day. There's, libations and, all kinds of different things going on. You have, Dolly Madison is there. I mean, really important people are, on this boat. So they're riding down the Potomac, and, Tyler decides that what he wants, or he's below deck, which we'll get into that in a minute. It's an interesting side note to the story. He does a toast, and he wants to do 3 cannon shots from the Peacemaker gun, right? The Peacemaker gun is what it's referred to as the Peacemaker, is on the USS Princeton, right? So this Peacemaker gun is this huge gun that they fire 3 times. Now, there's an issue with this because this thing, a guy named John Erickson had designed this thing. He later designed some of the ironclads during the Civil War. But in this particular case, he designs this gun, and he warns the captain. Captain Stockton is this guy's name. He warns the captain. He says, wait now. We're not really sure how this thing's going to go off, right? We want to make sure that this is safe, so we haven't done enough testing. So you may not want to, fire it, right? So Stockton, of course, ignores this and fires it not once, not twice, but 3 times. So the first 2 times they fire it, it kind of goes off without a hitch. But the third time, there's an incident. The third time, it explodes, completely explodes. Now, you can imagine this, right? They're going down the Potomac, Washington, D.C., and all of a sudden, on the third shot, which was a tribute to George Washington, right? That was the idea. That's what Tyler said. He did a toast and said, let's do a third shot for good old GW, right? And who doesn't love Washington? I know I do, right? You know. Anyway, so this third cannon shot or third shot from this gun, boom, it blows up. And it kills 6 people, right? And it not just anybody, but very important people, right? The Secretary of State, the Secretary of the Navy, both are killed in this incident, right? You have all these foreign dignitaries that are there as well. And this is it's supposed to be John Tyler showing off. And it turns into just this horrible, horrible tragedy, right? And it's quite embarrassing for the president of the United States. So Tyler is in kind of a bind. Now, oddly enough, Tyler comes out kind of smelling like a rose on this deal. Now, how do you say that? Well, as I mentioned earlier, Tyler came out okay because he was below deck. He happened to be below deck with a young lady. His wife had recently passed away, somewhat recently at least. And so he has eyes for this young lady named Julia Gardner. And I would say Tyler is 54. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think 54 at the time of this explosion. And Julia is like 20. So, which we'll get into exactly the what that means for today, because there's an interesting side note to this. But anyway, so John Tyler has this thing for Julia Gardner. So they're both below deck when the explosion goes off. Now, when I normally tell this story in class, sometimes I'll do the, wink, wink, below deck kind of thing, right? But I do believe there were other people down there with them. It wasn't like they were sneaking off to, kiss or whatever you want to say, right? But they were like an item. Right now, interestingly, she had turned down his proposals up until this point. However, this day was pretty tragic because Julia's father, David Gardner, was above deck. He's a New York politician, lawyer, and the explosion killed him. So her father dies on this day. So she obviously is, distraught. And she, of course, turns to Tyler. They get married. Within 4 months, she is First Lady of the United States. So it's an interesting story there. Now, this thing is it's just a mess. And there's a lot of we have the Secretary of State dies. Abel Upshur is his name. Thomas Walker Gilman was the Secretary of Navy. Anyway, this whole thing turns into a mess, and Tyler is reeling from this, and among other things, the Whigs are mad at him because of how he has governed as president, and now this happens. He, also, I don't know if anyone was asking why he's dating a 20-year-old. I mean, they should have been probably 54 and 20. That's I don't know. But interestingly, because of this incident, because of Julia Gardner and John Tyler getting married, a fascinating thing happens because later on, also, his son marries a much younger woman. And then it continues in generations. It must be a thing for the Tylers. Up until recently, John Tyler, who this incident happened in 1844, up until recently, John Tyler had a surviving son that was still alive today. it's a nutty story. There's, people will, they can't believe it, but the Tyler descendant, the son, has passed away recently, so he's no longer alive. But fascinating story. Anyway, so that is the USS Princeton incident, and there was a lot of things that repercussions that came out of this. But it is one of those fascinating things that happen. President's trying to show off a little bit, and it just turns kind of bad. And in this case, it did. John Tyler. Interesting side note there, but he did get a wife out of it. It's a young, very very young wife because of the death of her father. So anywho, kind of is what it is. Now the next thing I want to get into is a guy that we all know. He's on the 20. Andrew Jackson, old Hickory, right? Now Jackson, I will say something about Jackson. I mean, he is fun to talk about, right? If you're in a history class and it's about Andrew Jackson, he is one fun cat to talk about. There's no way around it. However, if you look at the history of this guy, he's not the best guy in the world. Let me just say. I mean, there's some serious incidents that there's some things you would look at with Jackson and say, I don't know. I mean, so you have to take that with the history as well when you dig into these people. However, this incident was one of those things that is hard to even believe when you look at it, but it did happen. So there was a funeral, a congressional funeral that was occurring in Washington. Jackson was, getting toward the end of his long presidency, because Jackson, interestingly enough, really kind of won 3 times. There was the corrupt bargain with John Quincy Adams early on when basically, I could get into that a little bit. I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent with the corrupt bargain, but John Quincy Adams is going to cut a deal to become president with the election, and anyway, so John Quincy Adams ends up becoming president when he doesn't really win the majority. It gets kicked to Congress, and he cuts a deal, and it's with Henry Clay. Because he was Speaker of the House, Henry Clay becomes Secretary of State, and then there you go, the whole thing. Anyway, Jackson ends up winning the next 2 times, but that first time he kind of, if you really want to get down to it, he may have won 3 times, or at least pretty close. Doesn't matter. Anyway, so in this particular, he's getting toward the end of this whole journey as president. Now, so he's at this funeral, and there's this guy. All right. This guy's name is Richard Lawrence. Now, Richard Lawrence is absolutely, he's guano loco. Let's say it. He's nuts. This guy has serious issues, right? He has mental problems. He believes he is Richard III. And Richard III is long dead, long dead. They found his body in a parking lot, a few years ago. So, I mean, Richard III was long dead. At the end of the Wars of the Roses, this guy's dead, right? But Richard Lawrence believes he is Richard III. And he believes that Andrew Jackson is the cause of the issues that he's having, why he can't get a job, right? Why he doesn't have any money and he's broke. And so I'm going to fix Andrew Jackson, right? I am going to take care of Jackson. So he attempts to do just that. He has 2 pistols that he takes with him. He goes to this funeral, which is in the rotunda at the Capitol building there, and it must be right outside. Jackson comes walking out, and he's got a cane he's walking with because he's an older fella at this time, right? So walking out, and here comes Richard Lawrence, this is a crazy dude. So he pulls up on Jackson, and he may have said something beforehand or whatever, but he pulls out one of his pistols. Right, he's going to shoot Jackson. Pulls out the first pistol, and click, misfires. Well, luckily he has 2, so he has another pistol. So he pulls out the second pistol. Click, misfires. No kidding. Both guns misfire. And then you have Jackson, right? So now Jackson is ticked. And Jackson is one of those guys, man. He don't tolerate fools. Now I will say that about him. He is, he'll do what he says he's gonna do, right? So he gets the cane. He has the cane, remember? And he goes after Lawrence with his cane, right? So he is literally going to beat. Actually, some people say he actually gets a few licks in with the cane. Other people say that they stopped him before he got there. So, unless you were present that day, I don't know. But I like to tell the story that Jackson goes and beats the crap out of him with the cane. Right, this is the story I like to tell. So I'm going to go with that. So he goes after him and he not hits him a couple times, and you're never going to believe this. This is kind of like, no way. Daniel Boone, right? Daniel Boone actually breaks this thing up. He grabs Jackson, pulls Jackson off of Lawrence, and there you have this whole thing. And so both guns misfire. So they take Lawrence. They're like, man, something's up, man. Surely this crazy guy did something nuts to his guns, right? He soaked them in I don't know, something crazy like animal blood or something. You know how crazy people will do. And so there's some reason why these things misfired, right? Gotta be. So they inspected these guns. And I'm not making this up. This is true. They inspected these guns and they found out that they were both in working order. There was nothing wrong with them. So the only conclusion you could come to was that just like everybody else, the guns were scared to death of Andrew Jackson. So there you go. Yeah. So old Hickory survives an assassination attempt. The whole thing. Now, Lawrence ends up, as I mentioned, he is legitimately crazy. So they find him, not guilty by reason of insanity. So he ends up in a institution for quite a while. I guess he can, think of being Richard III and the two princes in the tower and all that good stuff. So anyway, so that was kind of the whole thing with Andrew Jackson. Very interesting guy all the way around. Andrew Jackson is, like I mentioned, he's one of those guys that is kind of interesting to talk about. And he is still on the 20. Some people have tried to take him off the $20 bill. So, that's neither here nor there. But he is still on the 20 to this day. Good old Hickory, Andrew Jackson. If you've ever been to Nashville, you can go to his home up there. It's the Hermitage. Right. Another interesting thing about Jackson that I will mention, they asked him when he was leaving office, do you have any regrets? And the only thing he could come up with is he didn't hang John C. Calhoun or shoot Henry Clay. And I may have that backwards. He may have said to hang Clay and shoot Calhoun. But that was his only regret, was that he didn't kill two more people. This guy's, but he had a pretty good reason to be mad at some of them, because his wife, Rachel, had passed away after the election of 1824, I think it was. She had a heart attack and died because they had, side note, I'll go ahead and tell this story really quick. So it was one of the nastiest elections. They started digging up stuff on, it was Adams against Jackson again, and they're going back and forth. And they were trying to dig stuff up on both sides. And what they found was that Rachel had been married before, right, and never got officially divorced. So they started calling her a harlot and all kinds of this and that and the other, and all these, terrible things they started saying about Rachel. And she wasn't, by all accounts, she wasn't anything like that. She had been in a bad relationship previously, and Andrew had swooped in and kind of saved her from that. And they fell in love and, lived happily ever after until she died of a heart attack. And of course, because of her death, and this happened right after Jackson had won, he held a grudge against the other side, clearly, because his wife had died because he believed they had stressed her out so bad. That's what caused the heart attack. You can read the sources and come to your own conclusion on all that, but that's what Jackson believed, and he was ticked to the end, and he wanted to get him, especially John C. Calhoun, who was his vice president. And Calhoun is a fascinating character in and of himself. Terrible hair. Look it up. Anyway, all right. So I want to get into one more little bit of the story, and this involves the Tunisian Envoy with Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. It's a great story. It really is. So Jefferson and Madison had dealt with some issues with Tunisian pirates and different things along those lines. And there's a lot of history that you kind of float around about this, but they had a visitor come to the White House and was in the United States for a little while, and his name was Meli Meli, and Meli Meli was from Tunisia. He was coming over from Tunisia, and he was an important person. The Tunisian envoy coming here, his name was Meli Meli. So they decided, well, we want to really, try to, let this guy have a really good time while he's here. So as they come in, now it was a lot different back then. You have to remember the access to these guys was much different. You could go knock on the front door of the White House back then. And there had been reports that people would knock on the front door and Jefferson would open the door in his bathrobe, right? I mean, just, hanging out, and he would open the door. And I mean, you didn't really have up until after Lincoln was assassinated, I think it was Grant was one of the first ones to get like the Secret Service thing going. You didn't have any of that, right? So you could have pretty good access to these people if you wanted. So when the envoy came in from Tunisia, there was they wanted to make sure this guy had a really good time. So they tried to get the right kind of food and the right kind of things for him. And when he got here, he was pretty happy. There was just one thing missing. He didn't have any concubines. So he wanted to make sure to have concubines. That was what he was used to. So Madison talked to Jefferson, and they found a solution. Her name was Georgia, and she was a Greek. And this is written in documents of the United States. You can find these documents. I'm not making this stuff up. So they hire Georgia the Greek to, how should I put this, entertain Meli Meli, right? They hire him. And this was, something that he loved. He was really digging it, right? Because he was pretty happy cat when he left. Now, so how does the United States of America? So you're literally paying, and this is, money, the United States money for a, let's just call it let's just say escort. I mean, we don't say concubine because that's not really what it was, but it was someone to entertain this, dignitary from Tunisia. Okay, so how is it that they're going to justify this? Well, Madison, in his genius, this is the father of the U.S. Constitution we have here. I mean, he knows more about constitutional law than, he's the guy, right? He's the father of the Constitution. He wrote, it was appropriations to foreign intercourse. That is how they justified this, appropriations to foreign intercourse for Meli Meli, which, that pretty much describes it, I suppose. That is a good way to do it. So, and this was not, this is the kind of thing that went on a lot. But this was written up. It's the whole thing. The Tunisian Envoy with Jefferson and Madison. They worked really well together, these two guys. There you go. That's the story of Meli Meli and his time here. Now, what they did not do, what Meli Meli was looking for was tribute, right? They wanted tribute paid, and the U.S. wouldn't do that, right? We're not going to do that. But they did, hire someone to entertain him while he was here, got him food and all kinds of different stuff. So it's one of those things. The United States has some really, really fun history when you get into it. See, this is one of the things I believe personally that we don't hit on as much sometimes. I mean, there's a lot of terrible stuff. I mean, you could find plenty of terrible stuff. Even within this fun history, I mean, you have people dying. So it's not exactly all, happy. But I mean, it's one of those things that you're like, wow, I didn't know that. And maybe you knew these three little stories. Maybe you have heard those before. But there are so many. I mean, there are, you don't have to dig too far. All you got to do is read and you'll see it. And what I like to tell people is, all you have to do is look at the things, the documents, and the things that people say, and they'll tell you. They'll tell you what happened. So primary sources, so important for history. But anyway, I hope that is some fun U.S. history for you today, and I hope you enjoyed it. We'll do some more of that going forward. So, I hope everyone has a fantastic day and stay cool out there because that heat's not going away. So, have a good one. Thank you for listening.